Now we will move on to the next lecture, lecture number 16, lecture about regulatory frameworks for alternative proteins and what are the global perspectives. I think when you're talking about meat analogs, somebody told we don't have regulations for that. I think that is a group they discussed. We don't have regulations for that, but we do have regulations for some cases. So regulatory bodies are very important to regulate the type of food we are consuming. Now tell me, why FSSI is important?
In India, they found the regulation and guidelines.
Why do we need that regulations and guidelines?
Otherwise, anybody will sell anything
What
which
happens
may
if
have a
anybody
couple.
sells anything? Safety, right? Food is not only nutrition. We need to eat safe food, not only a nutritious food. Nutritious and safe food, they come hand in hand, right? Also to maintain the standard of the food. In other words, is the food quality, right? Otherwise, as I
Because
said, yeah,
when the food is being manufactured, it has to be uniform for all the in terms of all stuff, right?
exactly.
In nutrition, in human safety,
Yeah,
in providing the other benefits.
yeah.
So
So it
to
has to be nutritious,
it has to be safe.
healthy, safe. So somebody has to control this one, right? Otherwise,
Right.
as you mentioned, or as she mentioned, he will make an insect protein product and he has no clue what's exactly he's doing. He made a nice product, looks fantastic, and he also tasted it, looks very meaty, very juicy, very tasty, and he will sell it to Niveta. And Niveta will eat it, and then she gets stomach upset, right? Because he forgot to label the amount of allergens present it, and he did not do any analysis of it because he has no time and money for that one. He has only time and money to make a tasty, high tasty food. Somebody has to control him, right? And that is the job of regulatory agencies. They try to control things. They try to give guidelines on what to sell and what not to sell. They try to give guidelines on what should be the composition and what should not be the composition. They tell exactly what should be the labeling requirement. They tell exactly what should not be added, what can be added, what may be added, what may not be added. All these guidelines they start giving. When you go and nowadays you are a food scientist. When you go back, you'll always turn back the package and see they write a $1. They say ingredients list. They make something in bold, something they add E number. I don't know whether they add E number in India, but if you come to Europe, you'll they're yeah, the INS, right? In Europe, they add E number. They have a specific E number for antioxidant. They have a specific E number for something. So they have to label it very carefully. If you do mistake, they'll get a hefty fine. Am I clear? So that is the job of regulatory agent. They look after two things often: food safety and food quality and safety, and plus the labeling things. Okay. So you are pretty sure that you know about FSSAI, Food Safety Standard Authority of India, FSSAI. There are a lot of other food safety regulation. Can you name some of them? Very famous and very powerful one is FDA. What is the full form?
Food Food Drug Administration.
Food and Drug Administration of United States of America. Anything else?
EU, European Union.
EU has a regulatory agency called EFS. It's basically it's the one that will control the quality. EFSA.
Codex also said they
Codex also
they make
exactly.
regulations.
EFSA, European Food Safety Authority. They make a lot of assessment. They really check it and say whether it's edible or not. Yeah, then ISO International Standard Organization. Then again, yes, exactly. The Bureau of Standard now. The I think FSSI is a new thing, right? When did it establish? 2011 is relatively new. There was something called NFS or what is it called? Was that? EGMA. Okay. I'm not aware of the Indian rules, to be frank, but you know better than me. Just to let you know that there is a lot of. Do you know any other thing? But in fact, there are a lot of regulatory agencies, and depending on the countries. Okay, each country usually have their own regulatory agencies. They might be influenced by big ones: FDA, EFSA, they might influence their decision, but each countries have their own regulatory agencies. They try to regulate the food quality and the labeling requirement. That's the take-home message. Okay. I tried to highlight some of the important regulatory agencies in this one. FDA, EFSA, the codex you're mentioning, FSSI, Food Standard Agency, ARSO in South America, World Health Organization is not actually real regulatory agencies, but they're honorary regulatory agencies because they start telling some guidelines. What do you mean by malnutrition? What kind of nutrient food should be good for Indian continent, African subcontinent? They give some kind of advices rather than regulations. Okay. A lot of other things is there. GCC, maybe it's in Arabian continent. So yeah, I tried to copy paste it from an internet thing because I found it really nice summary. I'll leave the slides for you when you're free. Just find it out. There are some powerful and influential regulatory bodies. What does that mean? That FDA, just to take an example, they are having so good facility, so many people working for them, a very big organization. They actually are the pioneer of regulatory bodies. I can say that one because they really do a lot of things in their bodies. When it comes to cultured meat, they work a lot on it. When it comes to soy protein isolate, they work a lot on it. When you say insect protein, they work a lot on it. They try to do all the experimental evidence, get all the experimental evidence to give a regulation. They're really powerful. FDA can influence many regulatory bodies in other countries, in other parts of the world. They really can influence. If FDA says yes, if EFSA says yes, many countries says yes. They don't necessarily have to do the experiments. Am I clear? Maybe I'm not on camera here, but that's actually fact, right? Because they're really influential. You also have an influential thing is FSSI, the Indian one. And then you have a codex, which is actually the global food standards. It's basically a partnership one between WHO and FAO. Who is who? World Health Organization, FAO, Food and Agriculture. They're UN-based organizations, right? They are really powerful and influential. Then we have a ceremonial one, exactly. They can't give a strict guidelines because who cannot say what Indians should have. They can give an advice. They can't create a regulations. So they are honorary bodies, but still we seriously consider them. Okay. Then we have regional ones. For example, USDA can give a certification for something. They need not give certification for everything, right? Some regulatory one. So different types of regulatory bodies are available. Just take home message. You don't have to remember everything. Just remember that the regulatory bodies exist in each and every part of the world. Not necessarily every country has. We have 100 and plus countries. Not every single country has regulatory bodies, but most of the developing and developed countries do have regulatory bodies and they really control. You must have heard about FSSI visit to some places. Just check it randomly, right? They do really make sure that quality standards are adhered. Okay. Now I'll talk a little bit about novel food regulation around the world. I must admit that I found all the information in this website from Good Food Institute. Follow this one. So all my future slides, I acknowledge them because I did not have to read a lot of papers because they summarized everything. They made my life much easier. So I'll just brush through how the regulatory standards exist in different countries. There's not much to teach here, just to tell. Okay. Singapore, beautiful highlight is that is the first country where they sold cultured meat in a restaurant after an approval. Approval took several years, of course, but that was the first country that sold cultured meat in a restaurant. China has a 5 years plan. You must have heard about it. They are including this alternative novel foods in their 5 years plan. India, we have NSF. That's what I was talking about. There is a regulation about in India called NSF. You need prior approval from them before you market your novel food products. For example, FSSAI is a regulatory body in India. they are actually approved mycoproteins coming from fusarium. I talk about mycoprotein and fusarium in my last lecture. You can produce actually really a meat analog out of them. FSSAI also granted a peer approval to Reliance algal protein powder. Can you see? So they have also given approval for a particular type of algal protein powder that uses fermentation approach. So it's not a new thing in India. Things are also being approved in India. And I read this news article. They're saying that the DBT is trying to look after DBT, Department of Biotechnology, one of the biggest bodies in India for science and technology. They're working on what kind of guidelines to be made, what kind of food has to be approved, what kind of research is needed. A lot of debate is going on. Japan thinks it is an important. Japanese are very conservative people, and you know that. But they're still thinking about how these new products can be come into their portfolio. South Korea, you can see that last article. They started in 2024. That's last year. They started getting an application about cultivated meat. They are progressive now, right? They're verifying it whether it's good or bad. Thailand, first cultivated meat regulatory roundtable, they have held it. What I wanted to say that it's not still in the market there, but they are still working on it. Same thing is true with New Zealand. They have a very strict guidelines called FSANG. The full form, you will read it. That's a regulatory framework covers New Zealand and Australia. Israel worked a lot on artificial meat. Before Singapore, Israel actually worked on cultured meat actually, but they did not market for some COVID reason or something like that. I don't recall. So Singapore actually sold it first. European Union has a huge influence on marketing, production, marketing, and consumer acceptance of alternative products because they have a strong regulations, even stronger than FTA. I see sometime because I live in Europe. I know how strict they are. FDA has approved many things, but that has not been approved in European Union. Please note that. European Union is very strict on GMOs. FDA has many approved products on GMOs, but not European Unions. Product that can be sold in America may not be sold in European Union because they have a different rules. Am I clear? European Union has a different rule. The beauty of European Union is that if EFSA approves, it's likely that the 27 European countries, something like that, they can follow that one. So the market will suddenly expand because they're unions, right? Same thing is India. If the Indian government approves, Karnataka will follow the same thing. Madhya Pradesh will follow the same thing. Raurkela will follow the same thing. Bihar will follow the same thing, right? Like that, we have a European Union there. If EFSA, but of course, there's some local guidelines. I must emphasize that. When there are some local guidelines as well, they're allowed to make local guidelines. I can give you one example that there's a lot of thing going on about cultured meat in Europe, but Italy and Hungary, they were saying no, because Italy usually, prosciutto, salami, and all these things, they're really good at getting high quality, really delicious meat. It's a backbone of their culture and their business and their market. It's a meat industry, and they're not so positive towards cultured meat. I was reading a lot of news article. I don't know. I can't make legitimate statements here based on the news articles on the camera, but you can read yourself how Italy is doing things. We can approve it, but they have a local guidelines as well. European Union is very, very strict on GMOs, just to let you know. It's not approved. If you have a genetically modified organism, they say no. But some cases they are still working because now there is a new regulations about. I was reading some articles on from EFSA. They're saying that how many deletions of the nucleotides you need in a protein, sorry, in a DNA. They can have a different guidelines. Are you introducing a new gene exclusively? They have a different guidelines. So you must have heard about novel food rules in European Union. That's a beautiful novel food classification because even if you isolate a protein from, let's say, soybean, If you're using ultrasound processing to isolate it, they have a guidelines for that. If you're using cold plasma, it will become novel food under category. So it's not very straightforward to market that food products. Oh, ultrasound is producing a lot of yield, I will use it, I'll market it. No. There is somebody will stop it. They will ask the question. Am I clear? So there is a novel food regulatory guidelines. In fact, they actually assess it by case basis. That means they cannot generalize. They cannot say that, okay, proteins from soybean is good. The same rule is applied for pea. No. They would like to check whether the pea is doing the same job or not. So it's not generalized guidelines. Am I clear? You can see that there is some statement here. It can be sold in across 25, 27 EU countries. That's a beauty. If EFSA approves, if the EU or EC, European Commission approves, it can be sold in different countries. The market can be suddenly expanded. Okay. Okay, this is what I was talking about. I got it from GFI. In July 2024, Hungary introduced a draft legislation to ban the production and marketing of cultivated meat. Can you see? So it's not a universal thing. Some countries have their own opinion, very strong opinion on what to eat and what not to eat, because they look after the local cultural thing. They look after the local business thing. Okay. European Union, back in November 2024, genetically modified organism found in impossible food soy leg hemoglobin to be safe for consumption. See, basically, Impossible Food is an American company. They produce a burger. Okay, in their burger they add leg hemoglobin, which is actually analogous to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin and myoglobin is found in the animals that gives you red color. And it is known that the flavor, the meaty flavor you get is because of those compounds, because that contains iron, chelated one. When you cook it, they produce lot of volatile compounds, and that gives you the meaty flavor. And this company found that instead of taking this hemoglobin or myoglobin from animals, plants also produce leg hemoglobin, plant hemoglobin, you can call it as. When you add that, when you get the same flavor, they marketed nicely in the Americas to get the flavor. Now, the European Union, the EFSA also found that it's okay, it's coming from the genetically modified yeast, but you can still market it in Europe, because as long as you don't have a foreign DNA, of course. There's a lot of guidelines, but we are also, the EFSA is also becoming progressive. Am I clear? Now they can market their ingredient in the European Union. I would really recommend you to read through this article if you really want to know a little bit about how EU is governing their law, right? Alternative proteins and EU food law. There's a lot of information in this particular article. I don't have time to summarize everything, but you're welcome to read through it. United States has FDA and USDA. FDA is a very powerful one. And another last thing I wanted to mention is that it's not just about ingredients, it's also about labeling, right? Because the labeling often determines the consumer's acceptability. You know, sometimes they label it natural, sometimes they name the green box, vegetarian, sometimes they make it healthy. What do you mean by healthy? It's a stupid label to have, right? To whom it is healthy? It might be healthy for him, but might not be her. I don't like those kind of labelings sometimes. They just label it healthy. What do you mean by healthy? It's a very arbitrary word, right? I don't believe in them. But those labels cannot be put because some regulatory bodies have strict guidelines. You can't put those labels. You can't put vegan label unless it is so and so. You can't put vegetarian label unless it is so and so, right? So labeling is also governed by these regulatory bodies. What I found in the internet was that meaty, sausage, dairy, these are the things we have to be very careful with labeling. There are strict guidelines on that. You can't label cultured meat as meat. They are different. European Union has a very strict label on milk. According to them, milk is just milk. If you put something extra to milk, a flavorant, cannot be labeled as milk. Am I clear? If you add a small amount of bioactive compounds to milk to improve their quality, it's not a milk. So there is strict guidelines on what to label as milk in the EU, right? The labeling requirement. So that brings to the end of my today's lecture. So we have been discussing about the requirement of regulatory bodies. They regulate two things: food safety and labeling. Each country has their own regulatory bodies. Some are really powerful. For example, FDA, EFSA, EU, and FSSI in India. These regulatory bodies are very powerful. Please note that I'm not a regulatory person. I might be wrong in some statement myself here, because EFSA is something that the influence is the political decisions later, because then the government decides what to regulate, just to let you know. They might not make the rules themselves. They help to make the rules. There's a small difference here. So I have to be a bit careful with my own statements. But there are some regulatory bodies, they regulate the things. Am I clear?